Yeah, genetics crazy. You know, genetics is one of the greatest mysteries in the universe. So I'll tell you what I'm talking about. All right, so check it out. You took two slaves. Two slaves came together, made love, gave birth to a scientist, not a slave. Even, through statistics, they're supposed to give birth to a slave because both of them are slaves. But these two slaves gave birth to a scientist instead of a slave. So they gave birth to something in which they don't even understand. They don't know nothing about science. They don't know nothing about in which they gave birth to. So this causes a conflict between the scientist and the slave, the parents and the child. That's like if you took a prostitute and a drug dealer that came together, made love, and gave birth to a genius, they gave birth to a superhuman, they gave birth to an extraterrestrial. They gave birth to a being from a whole nother galaxy, a whole nother dimension. This happens a lot. It happens. Now, it's a lot of different reasons why. Because maybe great, 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 great grandfather from the 1920s, maybe he was a genius writer, what I'm saying? Maybe he was a part of the Harlem Renaissance, maybe he was a scientist in his day. And his gift skipped over all the following generations and it landed into the child in which the slaves gave birth to. And they don't have no knowledge in which they gave birth to. So you give birth to a scientist, they're not going to think with the mind of a slave. They're not going to see the world with the eyes of a slave. They're going to think like a scientist. They're going to see the world as a scientist. And this causes conflict between the scientist and the slave. Words like superhuman, genius, extraterrestrial, those words don't exist in the vocabulary of a slave. The words, millionaire and, prosperity and, legacy, those words don't exist in the vocabulary of a slave. They would take that scientist and put that scientist on a plantation. They would take that superhuman and put that superhuman on the plantation. They would take that extraterrestrial and put that extraterrestrial on the plantation. And if that child don't come to the realization of who they are, they're going to be doing the same things that their parents was doing. And they're going to be as sheep, just like the parents.